On this video, I'm taking a look at another hyped Kickstarter of the year, Kingdom Rush. With no knowledge of the iOS tower defense game it's based on, is that going to hinder my enjoyment of the game, or will this surpass all expectations? Join me in this video for more details. Hi, I'm Luke Hector from The Broken Meeple, and if this is your first time checking out my channel, reviews, top 10s, solo playthroughs, accessories, you name it, I've done video content on them. Be sure to check out the rest, and if you like what you see, consider a subscription. I'd appreciate that a ton. And if the game I'm talking about today or anything else on this channel takes your fancy, then consider acquiring it from zatu.co.uk, where you can use my code in the description or down below to get 5% discount off your entire basket of games. Is there a gap on your shelf that needs filling? Consider filling it today. Kingdom Rush is a new tower defense game from Lucky Duck Games, which has you defending your castle from an advancing horde and waves of enemies. It's based on an iOS game, and to be perfectly frank, I've never played the iOS game. So before I knew about this, I didn't know what on earth it was based on. I don't play mobile games, it's not my style. But you know, it's essentially a tower defense wave game in a sense. You've got all these different enemies constantly coming at you, and you have to position towers and various defenses in order to battle them off and hope that your castle doesn't get destroyed by the end of the day. It's a fast-paced computer game. It's apparently very popular and uses the same art style as this. This, however, I'm going to base on having no knowledge of that game and just go with what it's like as a board game. Kingdom Rush is a game played in scenarios. You have a scenario booklet, you'll pick your scenario, there is a campaign in a sense, or shall we say story progression, but you can pretty much pick whatever scenario you like and just get on and play it. You'll lay out a map based on these boards, and you'll have different waves of enemies represented by square cards on trays. You will take possession of a hero, which has a miniature and some special abilities with it, as well as cards for the various defenses that you'll have. You've got mage towers, archery towers, bigger, bombastic artillery, and even some guards that are there to slow down the enemy. Players have to use these defenses by placing them on the board next to the road, or roads, it could be more than one of them, where the enemies are coming down, and very much like polyomino style games that we've seen before, like Barren Park and Patchwork, you are placing tiles on the trays on top of the monsters themselves in order to cover up every monster on the tray. Once that happens, the tray is taken off the board. Should any monsters get to your castle, they will inflict damage based on the monsters that remain on the tray. However, there are some tiles that if they reach your castle, it's an automatic failure and everybody loses. Players have a color associated with them, which means that they can't build on every single spot around the board because they will be color coded as well. The tower defenses that you have are going to be fairly basic in nature to begin with, but as you go through each round, you can pass cards to other players, thus upgrading them in the process. But you have to not use them during the round. Players will be able to pass towers back to you, they will upgrade, and as time goes on, you'll be able to acquire more tower defenses, but also upgrade the ones you currently have, depending on what kind of tiles or what type of attack, physical or magical, that you want to inflict. Your hero also has a base itself that can cover monsters as well as its own special ability, which could also be boosted by a couple of extra abilities depending on what scenario you're playing as to whether they're accessible. This is not an easy game, and we'll be getting onto that a bit later, but you've got to survive until you can defeat every portal card in the wave deck. So the waves are going to come regardless, and you may have to take some damage and just accept it, but as long as you don't reduce your castle to 0 hit points, you're still good. But you've got to take out every portal card, otherwise that's an automatic lose. As soon as you take out every portal in the deck, then you win the game. So let's get into all the details, starting with D for duration. How long does this game take, and does it overstay its welcome? It shouldn't overstay its welcome, but that kind of depends on the players. This is a co-op game at the end of the day, so there's going to be a lot of group discussion. If you play this solo, you should be able to get through a scenario in about an hour if you know what you're doing, but you could be there thinking hard about what you're going to do on your turn, and so it will take longer, but at least you're engaged at that point. With other players, it depends, because you might come to your decisions really quickly and decide, oh, I'm going to pass you this and that. But typically there's a lot of discussion that goes on, and so a 3 or 4 player game especially can take a lot longer to play through because each turn can take a fair while in terms of, what is actually being done, because a lot of it is planning. This isn't like the iOS game, which is fast-paced and almost like real-time in a sense. Here, you see the wave, and then you kind of sit back and go, what can we do? What can we do about this?
Would this brilliant plan involve us climbing out of our trenches and walking very slowly towards the enemies?
And at that point, the waves aren't moving, you're just planning out your turn and then setting it in motion and then going through a little bit of upkeep in order to prepare for the next wave, see what they do in terms of movement and how much they damage, things like that. But you are talking that none of these games should take you more than 2 hours to finish, and that's with 4 players with a lot of discussion. For the most people who decide to play this, say, as a 2 or 3 player game, and possibly solo if you're thinking hard, you're kind of looking at about 90 minutes for a typical game, which is not a bad length, it has to be said. E for ease of play, is it too difficult to grok? Is it complex? Is the rulebook any good? Hit and miss. For the most part, I would say a good 80% of this game, it's not that difficult to learn. The rulebook is done well for the most part, but what it does in that other 20% is that there are just certain aspects of it that infuriate me or get out. I mean, they drive me nuts. There are certain aspects where I just wonder how that got through the final phase of testing. Some aspects of it are laid out fine, okay, right? Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, explain it with a few pictorial examples. But then you get some really questionable decisions. Firstly, the difficulty ratings at the start of the book. It shows you in iconography form all the 4 different difficulty ratings and then doesn't explain what the iconography means. So I'm supposed to guess. Okay, I start off with extra crystals, I think. That's what that plus with the crystal sign means, but what does that mean where it says 2 crystals for a 1, 3 for 2? Apparently, that's how many crystals it costs to buy a tower. Doesn't tell you that anywhere in that section of the rules though, so you just gotta somehow figure it out. And then there's also, if you play on the easier difficulties, you get this blue tile. What's that blue tile? I don't know what it is. It doesn't tell you until God knows when later in the book what that tile is. Why is it there? And even then, the whole thing about how much it costs to buy a particular tower is the same no matter what difficulty rating you play it on. So why is it even there as a separate piece of iconography that you don't even explain?
Did I miss something?
Just why? And then there's other little aspects as well, like the portals that I mentioned. You've got to beat them to win the game. Doesn't tell you that until about a third of the way into the phase explanations. You'd think that in the scenarios themselves, or at the start of the rulebook, it would tell you how you win the game. But apparently, no, you have to get through phase 1, which is the moving the waves and setting them up. Phase 2, which I think is like rejuvenate your heroes and various bits like that. And then you get to phase 3, where it talks about, doing stuff with the portals and that. And then at some point it mentions what portals are, and if you beat all the portals, you win the game. I had to read half the book before I even understood what my objective was. And there's not many of these, shall we say, grievances in the book. For the most part, you can kind of understand what's going on, but there's a fair amount of text. It's a game unlike many others that have come before it, so it's not like you've got something else to relate it to, but you could find yourself distracted and worked up over occasions like that where I just think the layout of the book needed an extra rework. There's just some really questionable ideas for why this is in that section rather than explain in that section. Why is this represented by an icon when there's nothing to differentiate it from others? It's not perfect. Particularly when you've got a scenario book and the main rule book. I always worry when I see this because you always think, well, hang on, is that rule taught to me in the main rule book or in the scenario book? I'm not entirely sure. So you're going to be probably looking up a few FAQ moments for this game, and there's certainly a few threads on Board Game Geek to that effect. So I would say the barrier to entry to this one is a bit higher than I would like for a game that's not the most complicated game in the world either. But it's not beyond reach, and I have, to be fair, seen a lot worse. T for tactics and strategy. Are the mechanics good? Is it going to keep you thinky, brain burning and engaged? For the most part, this is actually a high point for this game. It kind of reminds me a bit of Legends of Andor. This was a Euro co-op game that came out a while back where you were defending your keep from various things that attacked you. But it was kind of strange because you kind of let some things pass, because if you killed monsters, it accelerated the game timer and made you lose if you went too fast. Wasn't a big fan of the game in general. I thought it was like a weird puzzle game that didn't make any thematic sense. Well, this kind of borrows a bit from that. You can't usually take out every single wave that comes by you. I mean, if you're able to take out every single tray before it reaches your castle, I probably think you've got some of the rules wrong, to be perfectly honest, unless you are playing the intro scenario on easiest difficulty. But you've got to let some damage through, and so you're thinking, well, I can let this tray through, it'll do 3 damage, we've got 10 hit points, it's fine, we'll take that hit because then we can focus on other stuff. Okay, cool. So you got a few little decisions to make on that front. It's a war of attrition. You've got to last the time, not necessarily kill all the enemies that there is. Bear in mind, you've only got to kill the portal cards. You don't have to kill all the other enemies. So take out those 3 portals, the other enemies just disperse and you don't have to worry. Now, you are going to be planning a lot. I mean, in solo mode, you'll be thinking hard about what you're going to do with your one hero and the little heroes that you can use once each and all the cards and defenses you've got. But in a multiplayer, you'll be on hard discussion with the rest of the players around the table. Slight danger of an alpha player if you're not too careful, but for the most part, people should be lending their ideas saying, well, I mean, if I put a mage tower here, that will take out these lot. If we combine it with your archery tower, we could wipe out this trade. That's pretty good. I can't go over there though, I'm not yellow. I don't really need to use the guards this round. How about, do you need it? You haven't got any guards, and we could use your guards next turn when they march to there. So if I give them to you, you'll get some knights instead. And you go through a lot of that in the planning process, and certainly it's a thinky game. You know, this isn't exactly like, shall we say, heavyweight game per se. It's more midweight, but you've got a lot of stuff that you can discuss and plan, and you're gonna need to, because, well, here's one of my bigger flaws with the game. It's too hard. It's ridiculous.
Just give us the chance, you son of a...
The game has 4 levels of difficulty, right? You would think that most games would start you on the first easy difficulty. Work your way up through the difficulty ranks. Start with an intro scenario that's very basic, very simple. You whoop on the enemy and you go, that was fun. I understand the game. I felt a little bit easy. Let's step it up a bit. No, this one pulls a Gloomhaven and decides to punch you in the teeth repeatedly until you cry and then realise maybe we should do it a bit easier. Which you then go to the easiest difficulty and it still punches you in the teeth, causing a tear or two. This game is hard. And, you know, people might go around and say, oh, you're just dumb, you can't play the game. No, 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 this game is hard. This is a common complaint amongst a lot of reviewers, Tom Vassell included. And the problem is that it starts you on difficulty 3. Difficulty 3? Do you know what difficulty 4 is? It's called Iron Challenge, which basically means it's Ultra Expert mode. Why? What is it with games these days demanding that they put you on the hardest difficulty when you start? We haven't even learned the rules to this game fully yet, and already you're making me think, well, this game's just not fun, it's just too hard, and that's a big put-off for people. I mean, Tom Vassell used a hilarious joke in his where he said he doesn't teach his kids to ride a bike by putting them on a 10 speed and chucking them off a cliff. You know, that kind of makes sense. But then it's the same with everything. If somebody's learning board games for the first time, I don't chuck them into a Vital Lacerda game and then say, oh, did you find that a bit hard? All right, well, now we'll play Forbidden Desert. You don't teach someone mathematics by throwing quadratic equations in their face and then when they find it too hard, say, oh, maybe you could scale it down to basic arithmetic. No, you start at the bottom and work your way up. Gloomhaven had the same problem with difficulty spikes, and this one has a similar problem. The game is challenging enough on difficulty 1, and that's still the intro scenario. In fact, I played the intro scenario on difficulty 3 and got my rear end handed to me. It's like, okay, seriously, what? Put it down to difficulty 1. It was still a challenge, but I passed. I passed the first mission and didn't lose too many hit points. So I thought, okay, this is good. Let's do the next one. Scenario 2 on difficulty 1, and I lost it. Well, it's like, wow, 2 scenarios in on the easiest difficulty, and it's proving a bit too much of a challenge at the moment. You know, let difficulty 2 be the standard mode, let difficulty 3 be the challenging one, and then if somebody is so masochist in themselves that they like to play on Iron Challenge mode, I mean, seriously, who's winning this game regularly on difficulty 3 that they want to play on Iron Challenge mode? I want to see video evidence of this, because I won't believe you if you say it's you. But, it's a big put-off, because I want to play a co-op game that's challenging, but not too ridiculously challenging. I liked it to be a kind of 50-50 win-lose ratio. Like, half the time you'll win, half the time you'll lose. That's a good balance to reach. I don't want it to be any harder, but then I don't want it to be any easier. And I know that's hard to achieve in co-op games. But, wow, my word, this one is going to be tough. A, for aesthetics, there is too much to get out in my hands at this point, you'll just have to rely on the photos, but this game comes with a lot of components. The production quality is pretty good for the most part as well, actually. The insert is a little bit of a ho-hum affair because it stores some things well, but then you're still going to have to bag up a lot of these tokens that you get, and so frankly you might as well just do without the insert, particularly if you got the Kickstarter version, but I'm just talking from a retail perspective here. But this game comes with a lot of pieces. You've got a bunch of cards that are all different. You've got a bunch of tokens of different shapes and sizes and different types. Like, okay, these tokens belong to that hero, that belongs to that hero, that's specific to that enemy, that's specific to this. You've got the special abilities, you've got the scenario booklet, you've got the boards, you've got the trays, which are cool. I do like the tray aspect of putting the card on the tray so that you can put the tiles on the tray and they don't slide around too much. That's a pretty cool move, and it certainly makes for an easier playing of the game, but yeah, you're getting your money's worth in terms of the pieces here. There's a lot. You're gonna need a system to organize it well in the box, and I don't think the insert in the box does a good enough job of that. I mean, it holds the heroes fine, and probably the board's fine, but in terms of the cards and all the tokens, no. You're probably gonna chuck the insert and find your own system. There's definitely a lot to set up, but you know, you're certainly not going to be disappointed in terms of, oh yeah, these tokens are they're not flimsy, you know, the cards themselves are decent enough. I mean, they sit in a tray, so you're not really bending them or handling them as much, and there's not a lot of shuffling of the cards, so I wouldn't even say you need to get square sleeves for them either. All in all, very well produced. I for Immersion, is the theme strong and engaging? Well, yes and no. I mean, do not think that this is exactly the same as the iOS game. Yes, I've had no experience with that, but I've watched it, I've seen videos of it, and yeah, yes, they may have got the art style the same, and you might recognize names of heroes and villains that come from it, but other than that, this is very different from that iOS game. I mean, that one is fast-paced and frantic, this one is much more thinky and methodical. So I don't feel that there's a correlation between you liking the iOS game and liking this one. I think you could like this one and hate the iOS version, and you know, and vice versa. But the theme is still pretty strong regardless. You know, yes, you're putting tiles out on the board, which is kind of odd, but then it fits that different weapons would cover different areas. But the whole idea that you've got these different monsters that are coming at you and you're defending your tower, discussing with the players which towers you're going to put where, you know, there's some cool thematic elements to it, and it works fairly well. Yes, it's abstracted a little bit because it's laying tiles on various things, but it's trying to mimic an iOS game of a similar nature, and I think it does a pretty good job of abstracting that iOS game down to a point where it fits as a board game. Some people have got a little bit sick and tired of the whole idea that every computer game needs to be turned into a board game, but I think it works, and in this case I think they've represented the theme pretty well. There are stronger themes, I guess, in terms of a tower defense game that are out there, ones that don't rely you to put like polyomino tiles anywhere, but like I say, this could have been a lot more abstract, and I think they've done a good job. L for longevity, is there enough replay value in the box to keep you going for a long time? For a long time, yes. Indefinitely, no. The scenario book has 10 scenarios in it, and they are pretty different for the most part. You know, some have bosses, some have different enemies, some are simpler than others and different layouts, but you have those 10 scenarios and that's it. And there's no rules in the game for how to create your own map. Now, of course, do you really need rules on how to create your own map? You could basically set up whatever design you like from the boards, construct a wave deck of your own choosing, and then just say, you know what, go at it. So it's not beyond the regions of like human comprehension to be able to create your own scenario, but I would have liked it if they actually put something in the book at the end to say, well done for playing through this 10 scenario campaign. Now if you'd like to create your own map, here's some basic structure rules. Now, they're going to put out more content for this game. I mean, this is just the retail version I'm talking about. If you've got the Kickstarter version, there's at least 2 or 3, I think, other like bosses and campaigns that you can go through. So there is certainly a lot of expandability for this game, but of course that costs money. You may have already spent a ton on the Kickstarter, but then if you've just approached this game for the first time, then you're going to have to think, well, once I've got through these 10 scenarios, and that's assuming you can even beat the 10 scenarios, I mean, for crying out loud, I have not gone through all 10 scenarios here. I've played enough games, but I'm still struggling to get through the 10 scenario campaign in terms of its difficulty rating. So, you know, if you lot are doing it, then fair enough. I suspect you'll be playing this game a lot just by repeating the same mission over and over again. but you will get more content as time goes on. It's just going to cost you a bit of a penny to do so. You sadly can't create your own, but you can at least try and create your own if you just throw stuff together, but I don't know, there's a risk associated with that. So there's definitely a decent amount of variety here for a while, but it's not going to last you forever. You know, you'll get bored playing certain scenarios and favor some of the more harder scenarios, and there's only so many heroes, and they're not vastly different. I mean, it's mainly just a case of what tiles they put on the board and how fast they move, and that's really their main differentiation. Yeah, you've got the different spell abilities that they have, but only certain scenarios have them, and even then, most of those abilities are just a case of put this tile on the board, maybe a couple of extra tiles. You know, they're differentiated, but it's not like I don't think I'm gonna go, oh, I love playing the fire dude, but I really hate playing the archery dude. It's kind of like, you know what, I can take either or. None of them felt that different. So all in all, Kingdom Rush is a fine co-op experience, which will either be a decent puzzle game for a solo player or an engaging discussion with multiplayer. It is hampered a bit though by the difficulty scaling being completely out of whack for what a co-op game should be, and for the rulebook being a little bit up and down in terms of being able to understand the game. You're going to be referring to it a fair bit, and there's going to be some FAQ moments, so you're going to need a little bit of extra time to get into the experience, and that's assuming the game doesn't punch you into outer space in terms of its first difficulty rating. Seriously, put this on the easiest difficulty when you start. Do not listen to the rulebook on this one. But it still is a fun game, and it is well produced and has enough variety to keep you going for a while, even if it's not going to last you indefinitely and may require you to spend a fair bit of money on top of its already fairly high price point in order to get more content for it. It's a game I would recommend for people to try if they're a fan of co-op tower defense games, and so I give it a 7 out of 10. It's good, not great. It has some issues that irk me, maybe more than it will irk other players, particularly on the difficulty rating, but it's still a fun game which is worth giving a try. If you like that whole style of methodical planning and like discussing with other players what you're going to do, if that card play mechanic sounds your thing, and you just want the biggest, like most difficult co-op game you've probably played in a while, then by all means grab it, because I think you're going to have a great time. I look forward to seeing what extra content they bring out for it, to see whether it scales the difficulty in a different way or just adds that bit of extra variety, but it's still a good fun experience. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video on the Broken Meeple, but I'm not the only creator out there that you should be watching. Yes, we've all heard about the big lot that have got 100 million views every week or so, but I'm talking about the smaller creators. The ones with a few hundred subscribers, a few thousand if they're lucky, ones who are passionate about the game, who deserve your support as well, but they get swept under the carpet way too often, and yet I find that their views can be free of bias, but still be full of passion. So why don't you start with this channel and consider if it's a new one for you to subscribe to.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brian McDonald from Brains on Games, and I'm a psychologist with the practice that focuses on supporting kids who have learning disabilities and helping them to be successful at school. So I started Brains on Games as a way of sharing with parents information about the learning skills that are practiced by playing modern board games. So I don't do reviews of games, but I do overviews with the focus on the learning skills that those games require in order to be successful at them. So hopefully you'll come over and check out my channel. Brains on Games is on YouTube.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see and have earned the subscription, then please click the avatar to subscribe, hit the bell to actually be notified, and check out a couple of other video content ideas on the left there. Until next time, remember as always, it's only a game. Take care.